Welcome to Baseball Biz. Today, Baseball Biz has the privilege to speak to an author, a baseball scholar, a professor of the game, a loyal Marlins fan, and judge, the Honorable Louis H. Schiff. Lou is an avid fan of the game, and he has two loves, baseball and the law. He's kind of blended those together. He and Robert Jarvis co-authored the book Baseball and the Law, Cases and Materials. Lou shares that love of the game in the college classroom and on Twitter, and today on the Baseball Biz podcast. Welcome, Lou.
Hey, Mark. Pleasure to be here on Baseball Biz. It's always fun to talk about baseball. It's always fun to talk about baseball as a business and law, and I'm glad we'll be able to talk about a couple of things today.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to talk about a little bit about player contracts, but before that, there's a whole lot going on with your team. Let's see, you used to live in New York, but you came down to Florida some time ago and made the Marlins your team. Is that right?
Yeah, I made the Marlins my team when they started in 1993. I grew up as a kid, a Mets fan, and my fandom with the Mets started when they were a brand new team, 1962. I went to my first Met game in 1964. I was about 14 years old, 15 years old when the Mets won the World Series, 14 years old when the Mets won the World Series in 1969. Used to go to games all the time. The earliest I ever went to a baseball game without my parents. I was 12 years old. They let me ride on the Long Island Railroad from Belmore to a game at Shea Stadium. You know, no one would let their kid ride alone on the Long Island Railroad today, to a ball game. Even when my kids were growing up, I wouldn't let them go down to Marlins Park or Joe Robbie Stadium without an adult. But I guess times were different then, and fell in love with the game. And when we moved to Florida in the early 70s, I kept rooting for the Mets. But then when they started a team in Miami, it was time to switch, because the ball players that I grew up watching, Eddie Kranepool, Seaver and Kuzman, and Grody and Shamsky and Agee and Clendenin, who became a lawyer, those guys had retired. So it was a whole fresh group of ball players. And so I started my allegiance with the Marlins. I've been a Marlins season ticket holder since before they won their first World Series in 97, and I continue on today. But in the news today, part of the deal when Jeff Loria convinced the folks in Miami to build this really gorgeous stadium was that he was going to give them a percentage of his profits if he ever sold the team. He sold the team for, I don't know, was it $1.3 billion or something a few years ago to Richard Sherman and his group, a lot of money. But he only paid $157 million for the team. And only, when you look at it, so only $157 million for a team,
Nice investment.
A couple, I guess if you invested correctly in game, and what's that game stock the other day?
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, you could have made your money. But anyway, he sold the team, and he owed the city of Miami 5% profit. And he claimed apparently that he didn't make any profit in selling the team. And so a lawsuit ensued, and it was reported in this morning's Miami Herald that Mr. Loria and the city of Miami-Dade County have agreed that he's going to pay them about $1.6 million that he owed. That fuzzy math, I guess, because if you take 1.2 billion and you minus out, 100, 200, 300 million dollars, but then again, that's why I went into law, because I was never good at math. So I guess the case is now settled.
Well, with the game of baseball, you never know what's going to happen. And with team owners, they never cease to surprise me. And even when they talk about what they're putting in their pocket and what's not happening there. So without getting into any particulars, there's been no surprises with some very innovative ways that owners in the past have worked with their
creative accounting.
There you go, brother. I like that. That I'm comfortable saying.
Creative accounting.
Well, Lou, I tell you, man, it's great to be able to enjoy the game as you are. And have a team like the Marlins. There's so much going on. I mean, seeing the changes, seeing the new ownership with Derek Jeter, seeing Kim Ng come on. It's a great time to be a Marlins fan, as far as I can see.
It is a good time to be a Marlins fan, but it's got to be a better time right now to be a Tampa fan.
Yeah,
and it has to. So you've had all three of your major teams make it to the finals, and this has got to be the thing that's killing everybody over on the west coast of the state. Is you must wake up thinking, I'm in a dream. I can't go to these games. My team makes the World Series and I can't go. My team is going to win the Stanley Cup and I can't show up. And now my team is in the Super Bowl and they're going to sell 6 tickets for people to go to the Super Bowl game. And it's in my home city.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what could be worse, not being able to go to the games or it's incredible.
It's a fiction. It's a fantasy ball game. I mean, that's what it feels like sometimes. It hurts like heck not to be able to actually go out and see these people play. The fans.
You can wave to the buses as they go by.
Now that's about right. Maybe I'll do that too. But anyway. Yeah, Tampa's been absolutely crazy, and it's been interesting over the years. With your team and ours, and across all of the league, is I'm looking at the evolution of players coming in. There's so much change. You find a player you love, and then suddenly you find next year he's gone. Blake Snell, bye-bye. Charlie Morton, bye-bye.
You were one pitching change away from winning the World Series.
Yeah, brother. Man, I tell you, and it hurts. It really hurts. But what does it take to get there? You look at these young people, and whether they be in high school, junior college, and they have a path. They want to get to the show. If they have the talent, they have the aspiration and drive, they can make it potentially. But let's face it, we had 160 minor league teams until some of these changes by MLB. And from that, all of those players out there had the same dream. But during the draft, the draft of new players by the Major League Baseball used to be huge. So I guess what I'm asking, Lou, where does that young player, whether it be in high school or junior college, where do they start? Does an agent come to them? And if so, let's start with somebody who's a higher draft, maybe even somebody like Trevor Bauer. It's probably been 10 years since he came in. What's the path with somebody like that? Does that when they're playing in college or high school, are they approached by an agent? And if they're a top player, what can they expect?
Well, they're not supposed to be approached in a lot of ways. But you have now I think we're down to 5 rounds in the draft.
Right. And
everybody else is really just, they'll give them a contract if they want to sign after. Now, and there's a difference between the draft and international signing. So we have many, many more ball players coming to play in this country that are not subject to the draft because there's international signing. And that's a whole different set of rules. But you take a high school kid here in Florida, they've got a choice. If they're really good, they could get drafted out of high school. Or if they're offered a college scholarship, they can go to college and they can play a couple of years and then get put back in the draft if they want to as well. They get to pick an agent, obviously. Right. There are some restrictions about what agents can and can't do in recruiting some of these players, and that's really fuzzy too. How does that relationship work? Did the parents do this? Does somebody know somebody? It gets a little difficult there. And again, agents are supposed to be monitored by Major League Baseball. There's a pro. In order to become an agent, you have to take a course that Major League Baseball Players Association has, and you have to pass that test, and you have to go through a background check, and there are some things there that determine whether or not you can even be an agent. But once a kid is signed, the path to the major leagues is I guess it's not a scratch-off lotto ticket, but the chances of them absolutely making the show is not great. Not if you're a lower round draft pick. And even if you're a higher round draft pick, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get to play a substantial amount of time in the majors. It depends upon your health. It depends upon the needs of the team that signed you. It depends upon how you perform as an athlete.
I see that. And I see like some of the top draft choices have a better opportunity. Obviously, the more talent, the more likely of advancing. And in my mind, I was looking when the Tampa Bay Rays brought in Brendan McKay. And one of the first things I saw is, okay, he has a signing bonus of $7 million. Well, this young man may be sitting in the minors for a year or a little bit of taxi service, to the Rays. So during that time, I guess he could be paid only whatever the minimum is, minimum wage for a minor league team. And it's a good thing he's got that $7 million bonus, until he makes it to the show.
Yeah. And so a lot of times what'll happen is you take a young man like that who gets an incredible signing bonus. So the team has a lot more invested in him. And because they're not paying him a lot, and the starting salary of a rookie ball player is $400 a week, and the starting salary of a single A ball player is $500 a week, $600 a week for Double A, and $700 a week for Triple A. So there's not a lot that the team is paying for these ball players. And we can talk about the lawsuits that's pending right now against Major League Baseball. We can do that maybe later regarding whether or not the ball players are underpaid. They're supposed to get minimum wage. There's a wage lawsuit now. And as you know, minor league ball players are not part of the Major League Union. And so they're not subject to those rules. But if I draft somebody and I have $7 million that I've just paid you, and I've also drafted another athlete and I gave them $100,000 signing bonus, I'm going to care a lot more about the person I've invested $7 million in than the person I gave $100,000 to. So that person who you give the $7 million signing bonus to is going to stay with your organization a lot longer because you have a lot more invested in them. But once somebody becomes a major leaguer, starting salary right now, starting 2021, according to the collective bargaining agreement, will be $570,500 a year for a major leaguer if you stay on the roster for the full year.
That absolutely. I mean, that's a lot of good pocket change. Beats the heck out of that $500, $400 a week, and then they have to stay there. And like you're saying, there's a certain number of games they have to play for that. I don't want to get too deep into this, but arbitration, a player has basically, once they hit the show, they've got 6 years before they're a free agent. And I'm not going to sneeze at $500,000, but the thing of it is, the team can actually, Kris Bryant from the Cubs, he had some arguments with them.
Great example.
I mean, here's a guy, you have to have so many games a year, or so many days a year rather, with a major league team for that year to count towards you one step closer to free agency. And I think they cut him short about a day or two. And I'll be honest with you, Lou, I don't remember how that was finally resolved. But he goes
and that's exactly, you're right, Mark. And that's exactly what happens. And so when the team, as you're saying, has control of a player, and we've seen this happen, especially on teams that are, they know they're not going to compete for a championship. They can hold the player back an extra week or two, and then they get an extra year out of them. So they can kind of get 6.5 years instead of the 6 years.
Yeah, and on a previous show, we talked about Super Twos and other things. There's exceptions to the rule, like so many other things in life. And we're not going to get into that, but it is. I think you kind of hit it directly where it is. The team actually has the flexibility to hold a player back for another year. And I think I'm curious to see in the future what the Major League Baseball Players Association does to maybe fix that or make it a little more flexible. I don't know, but that's something for the future to hold.
The collective bargaining agreement comes to an end at the end of this season.
Right.
And I think you may see some of that come into play. Major League Baseball made a lot of money last year. I don't mean players. Major League Baseball made a lot of money last year. Don't kid yourself, with the expanded playoffs. That helped them tremendously in what could have been a worse year. And they want to do that again this year, but it's going to take the cooperation of the players, and the players are going to say, well, it's a contract. So what are you going to give us in exchange for an extra round of the playoffs? What's in it for us? Your employer says, listen, we want you to work extra. Okay, I'm happy to work extra, but what are you going to pay me to work extra? What are you going to give us to work extra? National League, they want to use the designated hitter. Well, what are you going to give us in exchange for that? It's a contract.
Oh yeah.
When I teach baseball law to my students, and for the last, I think 8 or 9 years, I teach a course called Baseball and the Law. It's called Law and the Business of Baseball at Mitchell Hamlin Law School in St. Paul. One of the things I mentioned to the students is that, baseball's a game that we've played as kids, but baseball, when adults play it, is a big business. And that's where the law obviously comes in. And I give the scenario that, how would you like to be a law student graduating and top of your class, and instead of being able to pick your own law firm, you get drafted, and you want to be a criminal lawyer, but you get drafted by a probate law firm, and they say, hey, congratulations, kid, you're not going to do probate law. And your choice is either sign with the probate law firm, or you got to sit it out and find somebody else independently and not play for a year before you can sign a contract. And that's kind of what it's like for a baseball.
Oh yeah.
If you want to play baseball,
you got to have two parties.
You can't get to pick your team. You can't pick your team. You can't say, hey, I grew up a Mets fan, I want to play for the Mets. You just can't do it. If they draft you, that's great. If not, you got to go where you're drafted.
It is a crazy world. And if you think you put those same type of methods on just business anywhere else, it's laughable. So, but when you get into the base world, it's a whole other game. And getting back to the path of those young players, I have a question for you too. As they're coming up through here, and we're going to talk a little bit about top prospects and those who aren't. When a team has a lot invested in a young player, what happens when they become injured? Say they're at, in the majors now, and their contract is for X number of dollars a year. What happens with that year? What happens as far as payment to that player?
Well, baseball is different than other sports. So if a player is injured, they're going to get their full salary. If a player is injured, they go on the disabled list, and let's say they have a 5-year contract, a 3-year contract. The team is on the hook for the full salary. Carl Pavano comes to mind when you talk about players that get hurt. The Yankees signed Pavano to a huge contract after he became a free agent and left the Marlins, and then they were on the hook. Got into a car crash, and he didn't tell them about the car crash or something like that. But the Yankees were on the hook for a whole bunch of money because he got hurt. They still had to pay him. And so baseball is different. So you sign a contract, this is what you're going to get. And so the teams do have insurance that they pay for in case a ball player is injured, but they're on the hook for it.
And it sounds like it's not just workman's comp. It doesn't have to happen on the field. It can be life. If somebody's out there in a vehicle accident or something along those lines, then it's still, hey, guess what? We're still going to have to pay that guy.
Yeah, but there's a couple of exceptions, and that would be if somebody does something that's against the contract, that, and it may be in their contract specifically if they've done something that was reckless or something of that nature. They may not have to pay them. But if it's an on-the-field injury, for sure, and they're out, they get paid for the length of their contract.
I'm glad that happens.
As opposed to football, where if a guy gets hurt, that's it. You're done. Thank you very much. If I'm a parent right now and I have a child that's a gifted athlete and they can play either football or baseball, I'd be pushing them to play baseball for sure. The number of years of a professional baseball player is greater than the number of years for a football player. And the injuries sustained in baseball are less severe than the injuries sustained in football.
Well, and that's a serious consideration. When you look at that, and the long lasting too, as far as like concussions, and when you're looking at football, and you see some of these guys 20 years later from when their career began in football, and some of them have trouble putting two sentences together. They've been injured in such a way, and what's the recompense for that? I'm sorry, see you later.
And there's some lawsuits now ongoing with the athletes that were injured that maybe didn't know the risk. But if you're playing ball right now, you kind of know the risk. It's like a cigarette smoker now. You know your risks now. If you're going to smoke cigarettes, when my dad quit smoking cigarettes in the 1960s, it was starting to become apparent that this cigarette smoking can be hazardous to your health. Now it's it's a known risk, especially in football, in violent sports, that this is a risk of playing the game.
Yeah, and we know, kind of jumping off here for a moment, we did an episode a couple of weeks ago on sticky stuff. We're talking about something to give a pitcher a grip, for one thing, to get a better spin rate and be able to place the ball, but then also did that give them the ability not to be going right at the head of a player. You know, last year watching Aroldis Chapman going ahead and trying to take out one of our guys, I'm sorry, Mr. Yankee, but you should be able to do better than that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
There's something right there I wonder about, saying, okay, maybe you don't even get kicked out of the game, but what about in a court of law? If things that happen on fields actually had to go ahead and be responsible as in a court of law, good Lord, you guys would be ultra busy.
Well, there've been hockey players that have been arrested for violence on ice. So there have been some hockey players over the years that during a game have injured another player, only to find themselves in trouble with the law. And that's happened for a lot of Canadian games where players were severely injured, and because it's above and beyond what you expect. You take a stick and you hit somebody over the head with it. That's not part of the game.
I hope most fans don't look for that.
I'm not aware of any. There was a great case, and I think that it was also out of Canada, where a bird was killed on the throw of one of the ball players, and the constable that was at the game tried to charge the ball player. Maybe it was Dave Winfield, where they had him arrested momentarily for killing the bird. And I mean, the charges were eventually dropped, but usually what goes on a baseball field stays on the baseball.
Right. Yeah. If you had two crowds of people running out into the middle of the field at one another, generally that's not acceptable. Right. The interesting thing too, I want to kind of get back to the contract that these players are signing. I mean, you have so much more expertise.
And it was Dave Winfield that was arrested. It was Dave Winfield was arrested in 1983 for killing a seagull during a game with the Blue Jays.
I love it. I mean, this game has got so much color to it. That's another reason why I love baseball, man. There's so much history and color.
So let's go back to contracts.
Yeah, let's go back to contracts. Okay. When I'm looking at this, and we're getting to the point where the player has been in the league for 6 years, now they have the opportunity for free agency. They're out there, and what they're able to do is going to help them command a certain salary. They are no longer fixed to one club. They are able to determine if they can come with agreement, like you were saying, two people sitting down negotiating and work out a deal. I know a lot of us as fans have been watching Trevor Bauer and say, what's next? And, one of the things I'm hearing about Trevor Bauer is initial talk was about a 1-year contract, and that he was looking for that. And I was trying to think, is that a benefit to him? Is that a benefit to the team? I mean, or the organization? What are your thoughts?
Well, you'd have to ask his agent, Rachel Luba, on that. He may feel that I only want to sign a 1-year contract because I think I'm going to be so good next year that you're going to want to even pay me more.
I love it. Well, no.
Or, yeah, I don't know. I'm not in his head. I'm not in her head as to what is happening, and I'm certainly not going to second guess anyone. No. The advantage of signing a longer contract is the security, knowing that if anything happens, that I'm still going to get paid. If I'm going to sign a contract with, say, Miami, I'm going to have to know that I like the team, I like the manager, I like everything about where it's going to be, and I'm willing to make a certain city my home, knowing that in maybe 3 to 5 years, I'm going to be playing somewhere else, unless I'm so good that I can control my own destiny with a no trade provision or a limited trade provision that says, if you do decide to trade me, I only want to get traded to these 5 teams, and I have the power to say no.
I like that. I mean, I like the ability to be able to have that flex, saying, hey, if you're going to trade me, this is where I want to be able to go. And Top Talent's going to be able to do some things like that. And setting Trevor Bauer aside, but just as looking at the idea, it seems like to me this year we're seeing more limited contracts as far as number of time. I seem like I'm seeing more 1-year contracts. And so forgetting Mr. Bauer, but in general, I say, okay, yeah, well, this can be a win-win. It certainly can for an organization who says they're bleeding right now and that they're not making a long-term agreement. Plus, we were talking about earlier is that a player, whether they're injured or not, they're still going to be played. Excuse me, they're still going to be paid whether or not they're actually capable of playing, physically capable of playing the game. Right. So I would see that as a benefit, for the team as well. I guess the 1-year contract. Go ahead.
To go back to the 1-year deal. So yesterday, it's reported that Adam Wainwright is going to go back and play ball for the Cardinals, but he's 39 years old, right?
Yeah.
And so they're going to give him a 1-year deal, and that's understandable. So you got a 1-year deal for I think it's $8 million that he signed for. That's what it was reported. And that's a win-win for everybody. The Cardinals know they have him for a year. They'll see how he does. Is he going to have a Tom Brady year like Brady's had for your team over in Tampa? Or is he going to have an awful year? And they were willing to take the chance that they think for $8 million for 1 year, will be able to put the Cardinals in a position to be a very competitive team and try to advance to the World Series.
I'm very excited to see how this evolves. I mean, we all know about as far as COVID and the ability to have fans in the stands and all the revenue that's been lost there. So it gives the teams a different perspective and the players too, when they may or may not be playing a limited season and maybe only getting a portion of what that contract has actually been negotiated at. I'm excited about this year. I was excited about last year. I didn't think last year was going to happen, to be quite honest with you. One of the earlier baseball business last year is like, I just don't see it happening. I was happy to see they came up with something, and it didn't seem like it actually hurt too much. I mean, there was a few things early on with you guys I was concerned about with Marlins, and the Cardinals, but things worked out.
I was amazed that the Marlins were competitive last year. As a long-suffering Marlins fan, it was amazing what Michael Hill was able to do with the team. Truly, I can't name half the players that played for them last year because I think they ran 60 some odd players on the team in 60 games. There were just so many ball players, and it seemed that everybody that they put in truly contributed. It was just amazing. It was like, the dream came to an end when Atlanta swept them, and then that was the end of it. Even beating the Cubs was amazing to beat a team like the Cubs who had just won the World Series. But then you look over it. What I wish we had? There is no rivalry between the Rays and the Marlins. For years they want to call it the Sunshine Cup, the Citrus Cup. There's just no rivalry between Tampa Bay and the Marlins. No matter how the media tries to make it into a rivalry, it just isn't one. It isn't. It's like I have a cousin that plays baseball. Yeah, they're my cousin, and I get to see him once a year. But I like my cousin. There really isn't any rivalry. Yeah, we'll play some games, and some years we'll beat you up. Some years you beat me up. But this is not Red Sox Yankees.
No, not by any stretch of imagination. And
this is not Dodgers Giants. This is just like two neighborhood kids playing, and nobody really cares because they're Florida teams.
Exactly. And you're two different, one's American League and one's National League. So I could pull for you guys as long as I want for most of the year. And
I pull for the Rays. And I was so rooting for a Marlins Rays World Series last year.
It's been so cool.
But obviously as a Marlins fan, but it would just have ticked off the entire baseball world. Can you imagine a Marlins Rays World Series? There'd be 7 people that would really care about the game.
Oh, brother. Well, we've both been snubbed so much, and you guys got 2 World Series.
Mark, truly, how many people would really care about Marlins Rays, Mark? Would anybody care besides the Tampa fans and the Miami fans?
I think you hit it right there. I'm afraid not. No.
The national media would cut off the bottom of the state and just let it float away.
Well, we're in a sport where there's a stronghold in New York and also in California, that both those areas. And I don't think they give much credit to most anybody else. Yeah, we'll look at the Cardinals now and then. And I think the Royals, who are they? You know, there's a lot of teams. Well, they're practically pariahs.
Kansas City has some of the greatest baseball fans. St. Louis has great baseball fans.
Right.
You know, Philadelphia, great baseball fans. New York, they're passionate baseball fans. Chicago, California, great baseball fans. And Florida, it's like, yeah, so what? You know, so there's a team in Florida, big deal.
Do we have too many transients? I wonder about the turnover population around here. It's like, okay, we're a visitor. It's like if you go to Daytona, you know, how many of those people who go to the 500 are Daytonans?
my season seats are behind the visitors' dugouts. And my seats are in the front row, not on the dugout, but in the lower bowl, right behind the dugout. So I'm 10 rows off the field. And when I go to a Marlins Mets game, I am surrounded by nothing other than Mets fans. That's all there's there. It's just Met fans. It's me and a bunch of Met fans. And because I don't know how it is over for the Rays game.
It's ugly.
We live in a state where folks are from somewhere else, and they keep rooting for wherever they used to be from.
Oh, I'm telling you, it used to drive me crazy. Go to a Rays game and I'd see all these guys with socks. You know, they got the Red Sox shirts, the Red Sox caps, and then the Yankees. The ones I had the most difficulty with were the Red Sox fans. I mean, Yankees fans love their team, and there's a rivalry, but Red Sox, there's something more bad blood between Tampa, where it's not a rivalry, but it's just a nastiness, if you will, when it comes into the building. Uh-huh. But yeah, there's just not enough Tampa Bay folks. You know, when I first came to Tampa, I worked with the New York Times, and we were also associated with the Boston Globe. That in itself was kind of weird. And a lot of the Boston people worked in the local office and said, "Hey, Mark, you want to go to the game, see the Rays? What kind of gear are you guys going to be wearing?" Okay, no, I'll see you separately. I'll wave from across, you know, the field to you. But it's crazy. I wish we did have more of a competition between the two of us, between the Marlins and the Rays. I wish we had fans who were that excited. I look at where I came from again, in Kentucky, where I had U of L and U of K, and it's practically a bloodletting sometimes as far as the ferocity of the fans between that competition. I would love to see that kind of loyalty. I'd love to see that kind of participation as far as fans coming in attendance to the stadium.
I think that baseball has suffered because of how ball players move so easily from one team to another. And you look at the Marlins outfield from a couple of years ago. Yelich, Ozuna, and Stanton. Was there a better outfield in baseball than those three? Huge. And so now you're a 12-year-old kid, and you're looking at the greatest outfield in baseball. And now you're rooting for a team, and all of a sudden they're gone. How do you build fan loyalty? Growing up as a Met fan, you know, a kid in New York, the team changed, but the players, the core group kind of stayed.
Right.
But you don't have that for a lot of teams.
The players,
and then again, baseball is fairly new to the Sunshine State. New, you know, 1993 for the Fish. A couple of years later for the Rays. It could take a generation or two, and again, it's expensive to go to ball games. Again, it's a business. It's expensive to go to ball games. Teams don't make it easy to watch their games. Games are too long. You put a game on at 7:00 at night. You're not done until 10:30, 11. If you're a kid, how are you staying up till 11 o'clock to watch a ball game? The World Series games go on till after midnight. How do you watch a ball game if you're a 9-year-old kid wanting to watch a game and the game's not over till after midnight?
Yeah.
How do you football has it right? You know, they play their games in the afternoon. You know, some of the games are later at night, but their games are accessible to a younger fan base.
Well, I think that's a key. I think the Major League Baseball has been struggling with this for some time, but some things seem a little bit more self-evident, like, hey, how about having more of those games in the middle of the day? The things they're talking about too, what was in the minor leagues, and they were trying it, and I think even with Major League last year, is after that ninth inning, you could put a guy on second base for running, for the 10th inning, the first part of that, you've got a guy there. So they're looking at things like that. They got clocks that, a pitcher only has so long before they can go ahead. They need to throw again. But you look at the batter stepping out of the box for 20 seconds before they can even start. There's things that can be done to make the game a little tighter.
Try to shorten it up. So baseball makes its money through radio and TV, the teams do. And so the more time in between innings, the more commercials they can sell. And so that goes into it. You also look back, sometimes I'll watch an old game, you see some of these older games, he's watching highlights, and you see how quick the pitchers pitched. There wasn't this, just like you said, they didn't step out of the box. Remember Nomar Garcia? He stepped out of the box, he adjusted his, it takes 20 minutes between pitches. Stand in the box and hit, kid. That's it. Get up there and hit.
Yeah, I wanted to boost some of those guys. It's like, come on, there's a game to be played. The rest of us like to see it. No, Lou, I'll tell you what, there's so much about this game that I enjoy. And there's so many different components. There's so many different approaches. Analytics comes into the game. The trading seems to go on more fiercely than ever. And I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm looking at your old team, the Mets. I mean, you got a guy come in who's going to infuse some cash into things and see what happens.
I like the new owner. Here's what I love about, and I've never met Steve Cohen, but here's what I love about him. He grew up a fan of the team he bought.
That means everything.
He grew up on Long Island. So he followed the team. He was there when they won in 69. He was there when they won in 86. He's followed them his whole life. And he look, I'm sure he did this. He's got a lot of money and he wants to make money, but he's a fan. And he understands what it's like to be a fan. I follow him on Twitter, and he's very refreshing to listen to see what he has to say. He wants the fans' input. I don't think our owner is on Twitter. He doesn't tweet out to the fans, although I've met him and he seems like a really nice guy. I had a chance to sit with him at a game my wife and I did a couple of years ago. The year he bought the team, there aren't a lot of Marlins season ticket holders, but I got invited to go down on the field when they had their 25th anniversary. It was a lot of fun, and I got to share a couple of innings with the new owner, and we spoke. And he seems that he wants to do right, for the team. And time is going to tell. I think this year is a crucial year for the new ownership team here. Fans have been patient, but they gave us a taste last year of what it's like to win.
Exactly.
And you look at the National League East, and everybody has made big signings. And if the Mets get Bauer, I don't know. The Marlins are looking at finishing fourth. I don't know how they're going to compete. We don't have any big signings. We don't have like the guy that we can say is going to win 15 games for us, 20 games for us. We don't have a guy that we can say guaranteed, 25, 30 home runs, 100 RBIs. We just don't have that yet.
No, and I mean, in the market's going to struggle as far as supporting the team. It makes it difficult for it to happen. I mean, I was looking at Theo Epstein the other day. And I believe it was at the Cubs. But the Cubs, I think he grew their base about, payroll doubled, I think, in about 9 years or whatever, thereabouts. But the thing of it is, they made an investment in the team. There was expectations, but those expectations were only going to be met if certain steps were taken, and it wasn't going to happen tomorrow. That's something from your market and from my market. I don't know if we're going to see that. We won't see that kind of activity as far as finances, but the love of the game, I'm still going to be there. I'm going to be there for my Rays and whatever may come.
And I'm going to be there for my Marlins because I as a fan, I love the game. I love going down to the games. I like sitting in the stands. I can focus on what I want to watch. I share my seats with my brother. So it's a great chance for my brother and I to, spend some quality time together. when our kids are all adults now, but we used to have, I think at the one time we had 6 seats maybe, and now we're down to 2 because it's really just my brother and I. My wife, when they got rid of D. Gordon, when the Marlins traded D. Gordon away, and they got rid of him, my wife said she was never going to go to another ball game again because she loved D. Gordon so much. She's gone a couple of times, and my brother's wife, she's gone a couple of times, but it's mainly my brother and I. We go, and then some friends want tickets. They purchase our seats. But it's enjoyable. It's a great ballpark. It's fun to go to a ball game.
It's fun to go up to a ball game. I think that says it all. Lou, I can't thank you enough, man. You've been fantastic here today, willing to sit down with us, talk a bit about contracts, talk about the nature of the game today, and the enjoyable, nature of what we have. Whether you're at the New York Mets, the Yankees, or the Marlins, or the Rays, fans get engaged. And just like Lou and myself, enjoy the game. Lou, again, I want to thank you, buddy. Glad you were able to join us here today on Baseball Biz.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, Mark. I really enjoyed it. Let me know when you want me to come back again. If I've earned the distinction of a second time, I would love to come back and talk later in the season or towards the end of the season and see where Bauer goes, and do we have a complete season? Is how a couple of questions now is COVID going to impact spring training? Is there going to be a standoff? I mean, is there going to be a standoff between the players and the owners? The players are going to say, we want to get paid for the full 162 this year. We don't want expanded playoffs. We don't want a DH. And it's all leading up to the new collective bargaining agreement that's going to take place at the end of the season. Will we have a season next year that begins on time? Will we have a season next year that has a different structure to it? Will there be less games? Real quick, a few years ago, one of the things before they signed the CBA, there was talk of cutting back the number of games to 154 to allow another round of playoffs. So will that happen? There's a lot of things that we're going to see that may change in the game.
That's great. I'm glad to get you here. I want to thank you again. We've had the Honorable Louis H. Schiff, and who's not only a judge, but is an author of the book, Baseball and the Law. He keeps up with the game, and he shares his thoughts, his wisdom, and some events, I think, every day on Twitter at Baseball and Law. So you can definitely check him out there. And once again, Lou, thank you for joining us today, and I do hope and look forward to talking with you again in the future.
My pleasure, Mark, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lou. You've been listening to Baseball Biz. As always, you can find us on your favorite podcast directory, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and more. Thanks again, and remember, you can also check us out on Twitter at @TheBaseballBiz. Take care and have a great week. Special thanks to X-Take RUX for the music rocking forward.